My name is Dr. Matheson. I have a special lecture today. I would like to tell you about some concepts from a good book on social entrepreneurship written by Michael Glauser. This book is called The Business of the Heart. Okay. It was written in 1999. So it's over a decade old, but still, these concepts are fairly timeless. And I hope that you take some good notes today and remember some of these principles for your future social entrepreneurship efforts. A good scripture to think about today is found in the Book of Mormon. From small and simple things, great things are brought to pass. That's found in Alma. So that's sort of the theme for this lecture, is by small efforts that don't seem to be too mighty up front can still come forth and bring great fruits and bear a great harvest that no one probably could have predicted. So I'd like to start telling you about one person. You probably, if you're involved in the mainland United States, you have heard of this organization, but you probably don't know the name of the founder because it is set up by her sister. Nancy Brinker is the founder, but you have probably heard of the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation. Susan Komen was a vibrant mother of 2 children when she was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 33. Her sister Nancy Brinker was there to help her through 3 years of cancer treatment that eventually took Susan's life. One time when this was back when cancer treatment was less developed than it is today, and more people died of breast cancer, and treatment programs were much less effective than they are today. So the 2 sisters were very confronted by the system that they didn't think was as good as it could be. There were no comprehensive treatment programs, no support groups, and there was tremendous physical and emotional suffering from the cancer treatment. One time when they were in a very dingy, drab treatment room, Susan said to her sister, "When I get well, Nancy, will you help me do something about this and improve the system?" And Nancy said, "Of course I will." But obviously Susan died before she could do that. But Nancy took up the cause, and instead of getting upset and overcome by despair from losing her sister, she became the start of this way to fund breast cancer research. Interestingly enough, she started out in a guest room in her house with $200 and a shoebox full of names of friends that she could try and reach out to for help. Her first fundraiser was a women's polo tournament. And the day of the fundraiser, it rained, just poured. It was a total failure. She sat there with colored crepe paper dripping off colors onto her clothes, and she was totally feeling like she was a failure. But she didn't stop there. That's the key. She kept on going. And so from that humble beginning, Nancy has built the nation's largest private foundation for breast cancer research. As I said, the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation. They raise over $50 million each year to help prevent breast cancer. So a great first example of how small initial starts can turn into a huge social entrepreneurship program. Dr. Glauser goes on to talk about in his research, where he went around and interviewed dozens and dozens of entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs and tried to find out what made them tick. Here's what he found out. He said very few of them had ever planned on starting a business. They first discovered a need that was unmet. That got them passionate about trying to solve that need, and then they started their social entrepreneurship venture. He said, while going about their lives, they stumbled onto an overwhelming need, developed real compassion for the sufferers, then took action to alleviate the problem. No one I interviewed quit a job and sat around saying, I want to start a non-profit organization. What should it be? Instead, they saw the need first, felt the compassion, and then took action. Saw the need first, felt the compassion, and then took action. And Dr. Glauser turned this into a very concise pattern. He called it see it, feel it, do it. See it, feel it, do it. So that's the pattern that he recommends for your social entrepreneurship endeavors. He goes on and talks about two experiences from the Civil War that were also good examples of small things that turned out to be great things. First of all, he tells the example of a university professor that was drafted and became a colonel in the Union Army during the Civil War, the war between the states in the 1860s in North America. And this fellow is named Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, and he commanded the 20th Maine Army Group. And he was assigned at the Battle of Gettysburg to keep the left side of their army safe. He was defending the very left side and wasn't supposed to let the soldiers come from the other side and get around his side. So he was told to keep his hill, he was on a little hill called Little Round Top, to hold the ground at all costs. And interestingly enough, a sub-part of the story is part of his group of soldiers were deserters that he was told to shoot if they tried to leave, and so that was sort of the raw material he had. He didn't have a group of wildly great soldiers. Some of them were deserters. And yet, in trying to fulfill his mission to hold his ground at all costs, he gave some great motivation and inspired his troops to victory. They even ran out of ammunition. And so how are they going to fight without bullets and defend their position? So he came up with the crazy plan to fix their bayonets, put the sharp knife on the end of the rifle, and to charge down the hill at the enemy soldiers. And this took the enemy so much by surprise that they scattered, and they ended up taking 400 prisoners, and they only had 200 soldiers on their side. So they had 2-to-1 odds against them, and they still held their ground and had an amazing victory that should not have happened, and yet it did. So a miracle there in the war that came from something very small. Then, 4 months later, in November 1863, after this great Battle of Gettysburg, which was considered to be the turning point in the Civil War, they decided to dedicate a military cemetery there in Gettysburg, and they tried to get really good speakers there. They tried to get the national poets, and they couldn't come. Finally, they got the president of Harvard, Edward Everett, to come, and he prepared a 2-hour speech. You can imagine a 2-hour dry speech at the dedication of a cemetery? Wow. And they had a reverend who gave the opening prayer, Reverend Stockton. He had a 12-minute opening prayer. And almost as an afterthought, they invited President Lincoln to make some remarks at the end of the address. He didn't have more than a few days' notice, I don't believe. And he gave some remarks at the end of the dedicatory program, and it turned out to be 272 words long. But yet, Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is now one of the most famous speeches in all of history. We don't remember the 2-hour speech by the president of Harvard. We don't remember the big prayer by the reverend. We remember the 3-minute speech by Abraham Lincoln as being amazing. So very small, and yet had an amazing outcome and impact on the world. So Colonel Chamberlain and President Lincoln each made small contributions that changed their worlds. Now, this author, he talks about one of the famous, probably the most often quoted statement in social entrepreneurship. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a day. Give a man a fish. Sorry, I got it mixed up here. Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. That's probably the number one quotation that students remember and talk about. Bill Drayton, as you may recall from some of your reading, changed that, and his goal was to revolutionize the fishing industry. So he just didn't want to teach people how to fish, he wanted to change the way the whole world fishes. And so Dr. Glauser talks about using this principle in his house with his kids. He said, I try to practice this with my children, but they're sick of it. When Eric asks, Dad, will you get me a bowl of cereal? I reply, get a boy a bowl of cereal and you feed him for a day. Teach him how to pour his own cereal and you feed him for a lifetime. When Tyler begs, Pops, will you look up Spencer's number in the phone book for me? I answer, look up a phone number for a boy and you find him a friend for a day. Teach him how to look up phone numbers himself and you find him friends for a lifetime. When Mark asks, Father, will you edit my report? I respond, and see if you can fill in the blanks with me as I say this. Edit a boy's report, and you get him an A for a day. Teach him how to edit his own reports, and you get him A's for a lifetime. They've heard this so much that they now cringe before they ask me to do something, but I tell them, if I drop dead tomorrow, you've got to be able to take care of yourselves. So one of the key principles in social entrepreneurship is helping people be self-reliant, and that's sort of the theme of what Dr. Glauser was saying here. He talks about the differences in the major political parties in the United States. You have some people refer to the Democratic Party as being liberals, and you have other people that refer to the Republican Party as being the conservatives. And they have different views on many things, but Dr. Glauser makes the point. He said, those on the left see themselves as the party of compassion, and those on the right as greedy egoists. Those on the right see themselves as the party of responsibility, and view those on the left as bleeding heart liberals. He says, actually, both of those parties have honorable intentions, but they simply focus on different ends of the helping process. Can you see that perhaps the Democrats are focusing on giving fish, and the Republicans want to focus more on teaching people how to fish? But both of them have a place. You're not going to be able to have someone really learn how to fish if they're so hungry they can't even pay attention and know how to learn. So you have to feed them, you have to clothe them, you have to heal them, and then give them longer term skills to be able to do it on their own. So there definitely is a place for both of those activities. The giving of the short-term needs and helping them cure or help themselves for the total long term. Now, think about which of those two processes is the more difficult one. Is it easier to give a person a fish every day? Just open up your fishing bag and give them a fish that you've caught, and you keep, other 9 or 10 that you've caught for your needs? Or is it easier to teach them how to fish? Pretty obviously, it's easier just to give them. Easier to give $1 to the beggar than to stop and to take the time to help the beggar get a job, get cleaned up for an interview, to practice to know how to present themselves better so they may be more employable, to teach them how to care for themselves with proper hygiene, to help them find a place to live. That face-to-face interaction is much more time consuming. And so you can see how a lot of people just give the fish because it's easier. But as a true social entrepreneur, you will want to find your long-term solutions. As I read this passage that is describing a particular group of people, see who you think it might apply to that you have some familiarity with. The essential ingredients are people who are willing to go to neighborhoods not their own, to work with people not like them, and to share the strengths and skills and attitudes that have enabled them to be successful in their lives. So he's describing social entrepreneurs. But as you were listening to that quotation, did you happen to think of another group in the LDS Church that we're familiar with? Right, missionaries. Missionaries, they leave their homes, go to neighborhoods not their own, work with people not like them. And so you can see that LDS missionaries are, in some ways, social entrepreneurs. Another important thing to realize is how hard it is to take people that are homeless, poor, and with addictions and having all sorts of issues, criminals, hunger, homelessness, addicts, abuse, and to give them a new life, a new focus. It is very different for them. Someone that's been on the street for years, to put them in a new house, it would be so foreign to them. So it's analogous to someone coming from their country, coming here to BYU Hawaii with our American culture, and how that is so new for them. The foods here are different. Housing things are different. All the different customs we have. It's very hard for those kind of people to adjust to a foreign culture. And that's the same way you have to think about people you want to help with their social needs. It's not going to be easy. It is a very tough thing to help them adapt to that new environment. One other last point I'd like to make here at the moment is by John Reynolds. He wrote a book called The Halo Effect, and he documents many unplanned positive side effects of volunteering. He said that people who regularly serve others make new friends, develop new skills, enhance their leadership abilities, increase their professional contacts, do better in their careers, and enjoy greater physical and emotional health. Some of these byproducts will eventually come to all the givers unless we serve only to get them. So if you're trying to do it just to get those things in your life, and you're not doing it out of the goodness of your heart, the volunteers really don't have those benefits. When we give something expecting to get something, we'll usually be disappointed. People will fail to thank us. We won't get the recognition that we think we deserve, and someone else will win the prize instead of us, and so on. So service rewards the giver only when it is selfless. That means that the self is not involved. When we give unconditionally, we enjoy the peace of helping others without having to keep score. So when you're giving, you're not trying to keep score to make sure you get everything back that you deserve. Okay? All right. Let's now talk about a few things that Dr. Glauser highlights in his book of some of these amazing things that people have done. The first category, he talks about serving our children, helping children. He talks about Henry Landworth, who started an organization called Give Kids the World, where he brought terminally ill children to Central Florida, where all those cool theme parks are, like Disney World and all the Disney parks, and other companies have built resorts, and to give them just a wonderful, happy experience in the last few years of their life. And he also talks about an interesting addition as well, to give the brothers and sisters of sick children this opportunity as well. They have been often neglected by the parents who have been focusing on the sick child, and so the well children also need that kind of relief and recreation in their life to help them deal with some of the effects of their brother or sister's illness. Here's another person called Aubin Burnside, she founded Suitcases for Kids, an organization that collects used suitcases for children in foster care. She started the organization when she was 11 years old. Mick Shannon and his partner Joe Lake are the founders of Children's Miracle Network. They raise more than $250 million a year for children's hospitals across America. They started with nothing. They just went out for 3 years and lined up an elaborate network of television stations, children's hospitals, and corporate sponsors. And it's gone from nothing to $250 million annual system. Then here's one about Peter Gold and his partner Kyle Zimmer are founders of an organization called First Book, where they give a brand new book to a child. Not a used one, not a discarded one, not one that's already been written in by someone else. A brand new book where they can write their name in it and it's their book. And it really helps the kids increase their literacy and their reading skills and can get some of these kids on a path to education that they never would have got. All from giving them their new first book. Another one here, they give a camp free of charge to children with cancer. And here is an organization where a teacher in high school started Food from the Hood after the Los Angeles riots. It's a student-owned business that sells organic produce and 2 lines of salad dressing, providing food for the community's needy and also scholarships for students. Then we have an organization called Manchester Craftsmen's Guild. This guy has done many things. He's probably one of the most creative social entrepreneurs that Dr. Glauser found. This first Manchester Craftsmen's Guild uses the arts to motivate inner city youth to stay in school and go to college. They have a good success rate of kids that go on to college. He also operates Bidwell Training Center, a vocational school that helps economically disadvantaged individuals enter the workforce, and they place 75% of their students into well-paying jobs. And so he's done some great things there in many ways. So he's not just done one thing, but he started one and then started another and started another. Here's one called Athletes Against Drugs, to give young Chicago students positive alternatives to the drug scene. Here's Meredith Blake, the founder of Break the Cycle, an organization that offers prevention programs, legal services, and support to adolescents who are victims of domestic and dating violence. So there are some really cool things out there, and you don't always have to have them be, just the way the norms you would expect society to have you form it. So here's an example of a company where they wanted to help people with their food problems. And they said, all right, we'll get poor families that need more food to give us $11 and we'll buy in bulk food at a big discounted price because we're buying it in such large quantities, and so they'll get more bang for their buck. And people said, oh, you can't get people to give you money like that. The poor people, they need that money. And this entrepreneur had the vision that they would do it, and they first got 7,000 families to give them $11, and they gave them back $30 to $40 of food that they had bought in bulk at a better price. So there are some great things going on out there. I would encourage you to look more at this book. We'll look at later in a future discussion where he gives 7 points for building a successful nonprofit organization. But that's all we'll discuss from this book today. Good reading and good social entrepreneurship.